Now let's transition to Brandon Staley, who once again got snippy after the game. I feel bad for Justin Herbert. Quentin Johnson appears to be, if not a whiff, he is just a non-factor until year 2 at a wide receiver. He's lost. He's over his head. I've heard he's struggling to learn the playbook. So he doesn't play with a ton of urgency. He's loose. He doesn't run precise routes. But do you believe, I mean, you're a former scout, you know how these guys think. I have to believe at least Dean Spanos has to now at least consider, sleep on it, making a change at head coach, right?
Listen, how did they not know when the season ended last year? I mean, they had 2 of the most devastating losses you'll ever see, right? 2 years ago to the Raiders with an interim head coach on a Sunday Night Football to get into the playoffs, remember? When Brandon Staley was doing ludicrous things like going for it on his own 20-yard line. I mean, in a winner-get-in game. And then last year, to me, was more symbolic of kind of what we've seen, kicking the crap out of the Jags, and then the blown coverage out of the blown coverage after the blown coverage. Today, and this is what I say when I preface by saying we got to be careful about the Jordan Love. I mean, guys are kind of wide open against the Chargers. No team consistently blows coverages, especially in big spots. That's not, you could be playing the Bears or, I mean, the Panthers and guys aren't as open. So it's you got to be careful with the Chargers. But to me, the snippiness, you just don't get to act like that if you're not Bill Parcells, Belichick, Andy Reid. Like, I mean, what are you doing? And I think it reflects, he knows, I mean, this plane flight ride home has to be extremely uncomfortable. Who knows, by the end of the day tomorrow, he's not going to have to clear out his locker. And let's face it, I think Joey Bosa might have torn his Achilles. I mean, this franchise right now is in major shambles for having a really good high-end quarterback. It's kind of sad. It really is. You got to feel for, just, I don't know how many of them there are, but I actually know a decent amount from San Diego Charger fans for a team that always has talent. You know, a lot of crappy teams, like, they can just, the Bears, what do they do? The Chargers always have talent my entire life. I mean, back to the Drew Brees early days, to the Phillip Rivers days, to this team over the last 3 or 4 years, and just the results the same. I mean, they're 4-6. To go 4-6 in the NFL, you got to be, that's like the Giants, the Jets. I mean,
yes.
Poorly teams that don't have a lot of depth of talent. That is not the case here.
Well, and also the Spanoses have been cheap with coaches. There's been some first-round holdouts. Brian Daboll was sitting there. Brian Daboll wanted Justin Herbert. Brian Daboll wanted the job. Tom Telesco knows Brian Daboll. They've known each other for years, and the Spanos family went cheap. So you get what you pay for. So I mean, I've gone to dinner with Dean Spanos a couple of times. I know his kids. Tom Telesco's a friend. If you look at some of the offenses struggling, Jets, defensive coach, Seattle in the last month, defensive coach, Washington, defensive coach, Pittsburgh, defensive coach, Chicago, defensive coach. This team is just underachieving. The Spanos has had Brian Daboll there. Remember when they hired Brandon Staley? We were surprised by it.
Big time.
Big time. I mean, it was kind of a given based on Telesco's relationship with Brian Daboll. And all my guys in the league, again, you're a former NFL scout. My guys in the league were all like, oh, Daboll's great. Eric Mangini, whether we're at dinner or we're on the air, has said, like, I will vouch for Brian Daboll. He knows him very well. He's like one of the smartest guys I've ever had the pleasure to be around. So I look at the Chargers and I think to myself, we can always blame this or that. The Spanos family had an opportunity with going to Brian Daboll. It probably, because Staley's probably one of the cheapest coaches in the league.
It has to be.
And so the other thing to consider, John, if you give it to Kellen Moore, you can kick the tires on Kellen Moore as a head coach. You just figure out in the last 6, I mean, doesn't that make sense to you?
Well, but even if we rewind, 11 months, they had the opportunity. I don't know if they would have had to pay as much that the Denver Broncos paid to get Sean Payton to come get that job. Didn't he love LA? He was right. It was clear that he would have loved to work with Justin Herbert. But what did that tell you? It wasn't to me as much about Brandon Staley. It was more, well, this price tag to get this guy, even if we don't have to give him the $90, $100 million Denver, we were going to have to give a number that we're very uncomfortable giving, which to me, Colin, is insane. I do think being cheap when you inherit the wealth, and 2, when you're making the level of wealth these teams, it's like a disease because they're getting $400 million a year alone from the NFL. Well, your payroll is $220 million. So you're talking an extra $120 million. And this is not a signing bonus. You don't have to give the $70 million to Sean Payton on day one when he signs the contract. You pay it over the life of the deal. So even if you got to buy Staley out for $15 million, these numbers to the 99.9% of people, to these NFL owners, are a line item. It's an expense. And I think some of these, you look at these old school owners that have been involved in the league when it was really, really cheap and money was not flowing like it was now in the 70s and the 80s. The Bears are a good example. They're very uncomfortable with the way the digits have changed. It's why some of these owners that got into the 80s but were Mavericks like Jerry or Robert Kraft are unfazed by the big numbers. They're willing to spend. But when you look at Spanos, $15, $20 million to buy a guy out and then 70 to pay a guy is crazy to him. This is where listen, say what you want about Mark Davis. He has not been afraid to take big swings with money because he knows it's kind of all monopoly money. This isn't real. You're not actually you could be the worst team in the league, right? I mean, you could literally not win a game and you get the same amount of money as the Eagles or 49ers that carried you television ratings. And that's not even counting the other money that you make. So yeah, to me, Kellen Moore, to give him I think that he's a viable candidate in general, given that they already know him. Clearly, if we assume that him and Herbert have a really good relationship, like Brandon Staley, like Anthony Lynn, like Mike McCoy, is not going to cost the premium numbers. So you could get him a 4-year deal for, let's say, $20, $30 million, whatever. I mean, it's a lot of money to most people, but to these NFL coaches, I mean, you got 15, 20 college coaches are making $9, $10 million. So and the other thing is, in your division, you have the best coach currently in the NFL, who has a 27-year-old superstar quarterback, and Sean Payton, who over the last couple of weeks has proven like he's not the village idiot anymore. So, and listen, the Raiders, I mean, say what you want, they just have a lot of talent, and they've accumulated some players. So you better put some effort into this. What's the point of paying your quarterback all this money? And they did cut him an enormous check, and they put him under the premium contract. If you're not going to do everything humanly possible to surround him, and it starts with the guy calling the play / the head coach. It's football season, and you can now get almost anything you need for game day delivery with Uber Eats. What do we mean by almost? Can Uber Eats deliver foam fingers? No. But chicken fingers? Yes. Touchdown dances? No. Buttermilk ranches? Yes. Field goals? No. Grilling coals? Yes. Running backs? No. Ribs? Yes. Blitzes? No. Beers? Yes. Defense? No. Deodorant? Yes. Game-clinching turnovers? No. But pastry turnovers? You know, the kind with delicious apple filling? Oh yeah, because that's groceries. And get those delivered with Uber Eats too, along with food from your favorite restaurants and other essentials. And the best part, you can get it all without missing a second of action on your TV. There you have it. Get almost anything for game day delivered with Uber Eats, official on-demand food delivery partner of the NFL. Order now. Alcohol in select markets. Product availability may vary by region. See app for details.